This is Plant-Based Briefing. More meat farmers are switching from cows to plant-based agriculture by Maxwell Rabb at thebeet.com. And I'm your host, Marian Erickson, and this is the Plant-Based Podcast where I curate a variety of content on plant-based and vegan topics, get permission, and read it to you here in about 10 minutes or less every weekday. Today's post is from thebeet.com. They're a plant-based media platform, and I highly recommend following them on social media or even subscribing to their newsletter. They share such an incredible variety of plant-based and vegan information. So now let's get to today's plant-based briefing. More meat farmers are switching from cows to plant-based agriculture by Maxwell Rabb at thebeet.com. The U.S. meat processing industry alone employs nearly 500,000 people, making it the top-ranked manufacturing industry by sheer numbers of workers employed. With the sales of plant-based milk and meat alternatives made of peas and other plant ingredients on the rise, farmers worldwide have started shifting from raising livestock to growing crops to support this shift. Now, plant-based meat makers such as Impossible Foods and Beyond Meat are seeing a trend in which farmers move away from animal agriculture in favor of growing oats, peas, soybean, and other crops that will be needed to sustain this consumer trend. With advancements in food technology, Impossible CEO Pat Brown is seeking to help end animal farming by 2035, and the sentiment is reflected in consumer behavior. The total market for plant-based meat and non-dairy milks and cheeses, as well as other popular vegan products, is projected to reach $22 billion by 2025, undercutting the major meat and dairy industries worldwide. Other reports have noted that the popularity of plant-based milk could be directly tied to the decline in cow's milk consumption. Today, the BBC published an article that detailed meat and dairy farmers who decided to shift to plant-based agriculture, citing environmental, animal welfare, and health reasons. Farmers adopting plant-based agriculture. The BBC article featured an ex-dairy farmer, Lawrence Candy, who lost his herd to bovine tuberculosis. The event motivated him to leave livestock behind, claiming that he did not want to take part in the sweeping death caused by these conditions. It made me wonder if we can justify the industrial slaughter of sentient beings, Candy said. As a society, we have to question this. With the help of the Scottish organization Farmers for Stock-Free Farming, Candy is transitioning his agricultural facilities to produce exclusively plant-based products. By teaming up with Farmers for Stock-Free Farming, Candy is now producing wheat, oat, barley, and broad beans through a veganic production, a sustainable approach that also prohibits manure. He's also working with the International Biocyclic Vegan Network to fully adopt these veganic practices. It allows for 2 years to transition out of a livestock enterprise and establish suitable alternatives, he said. This approach enables the farmer to have a suitable timescale to develop their business plans without a financial impact. I'm trying to add value. There are currently very few farmers growing veganically, but obviously veganism is a growing trend in this country. Candy is not alone, but these plant-based farmers have received plenty of feedback. Canadian farmer Mark Lanigan told the BBC that when he transitioned to vegan farming practices, his neighbors stopped talking to him. Noting that the transition was very quick and inspired by animal welfare, he now operates an animal sanctuary instead, growing radishes, cabbages, and beets as well. This trend is not surprising because nearly half of British consumers have started limiting meat consumption. Consumers increasingly look for sustainable food options. Approximately 55% of shoppers keep sustainability in mind when grocery shopping. Associate Professor at the Royal Agricultural University, Dr. Nicola Cannon, revealed that dairy and meat farmers have reason to consider plant-based systems. The farming sector, especially the dairy industry, is struggling to meet the labor requirements at the moment, and what with the meat sector's aging agricultural population, the crop sector is generally less intensive, Cannon told BBC. They're also being driven to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. It's difficult for the livestock sector as they're burping and farting methane. It might make people think of moving to a simpler system and a plant-based system where they've got more control of emissions. A toolkit for vegan farming. Within the United States, Miyoko's Creamery, the famous vegan dairy company run by Miyoko Schinner, released a farmer toolkit through its Dairy Farm Transition Program. Teaming up with Mercy for Animals and Animal Outlook, Miyoko's is working to provide the resources to help dairy farmers maintain their farms and protect the environment. The program will help farmers drop their dependence on animal agriculture. The pressure to adopt plant-based practices is growing rapidly across the globe. This May, Compassion in World Farming delivered a petition urging world leaders to stop animal farming and transition to plant-based practice. The petition was delivered to the leaders of Argentina, Brazil, Australia, Canada, China, the EU, Japan, South Africa, South Korea, New Zealand, the United Kingdom, and the United States on May 5th. With meat production responsible for 57% of the food industry's deadly greenhouse gas emissions, it is becoming more urgent for world leaders to enact legislation to protect the planet. The petition notes that 86 billion animals are farmed every day, and transitioning to a plant-based agriculture industry could significantly reduce strains on farmers, the environment, and consumer health. You just listened to More Meat Farmers Are Switching from Cows to Plant-Based Agriculture by Maxwell Rabb at thebeet.com. And I'm Marian Erickson, your host, and this is more great news. I know many farmers are switching from animal farming to plant farming. Turns out those giant factory farm chicken sheds are great for growing mushrooms. There's a great story of a North Carolina farmer named Craig Watts. His family had been farming for a long time, way back to the original land grant from King George. But as the industry became more consolidated and he began raising chickens under contract, he realized that he was essentially an indentured servant. The suffering these farmers go through is heartbreaking, but in this case, the result was wonderful. Working with organizations like Transformation helped him transition to plant farming. I'll put a link in the show notes, but there's a great podcast episode on the Rich Roll podcast where he interviews Leah Garces, the head of Mercy for Animals. She worked with Craig Watts to help him tell his story, and their unlikely partnership inspired her to found Transformation and work with farmers to find alternatives to animal farming. So I'll put some links on that in the show notes for you to check out as well. And another relevant point, not sure if you saw the documentary Plant Pure Nation. It's by Nelson Campbell, son of Dr. T. Colin Campbell of the China Study, and it's focused on plant-based health and nutrition and preventing and reversing chronic disease, and the politicians and industry lobbyists who are against that message getting out to the public. But anyway, about 30 minutes in, they interview a North Carolina cattle farmer who did their plant-based jumpstart program and saw incredible health benefits in just 10 days. Anyway, they asked, as a farmer, how do you feel about the idea that maybe the future of farming could be in plants as opposed to dairy and livestock? And the answer was, well, I think my family's always sort of been progressive in that way. My family didn't start in livestock. They started in pickles and preserves, and then they went to dairy, and then the beef. I think anytime you diversify, you're better off, and being more sustainable. So that was eye-opening for me. Not every animal farmer today was always an animal farmer. They may have farmed plants before and transitioned, even a couple of times like this farmer's family did. So it's important to help farmers understand that there are programs out there that can help them transition to plant-based farming. And I'll put links to some of those programs in the show notes as well. So please share this episode with anyone who might benefit, and thanks for listening.